and welcome to Kalkine Conversations with me, Samta. In these stressful times like these, lifestyle-related ailments are something that can't be ignored. It is a need of the hour to remain fit. And to discuss this today, we have Mr. Stephen Ora, the CEO of OptiBiotix Health Plc, a life sciences company that develops superior food products that can treat obesity, high cholesterol, diabetes, and other lifestyle-related issues. The ingredients and products developed by OptiBiotix are backed by highly quality scientific studies and research. Their quality ingredients and superior white label food and supplement solutions are now being lapped up globally. So let's start with today's edition of Kalkine Conversation with Mr. Stephen Ora. Welcome to the show, Mr. Ora.
Oh, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Ora. Let's start with the first question. Cardiovascular diseases is the world's biggest killer. Why is that the case, and what are the treatment options available in the market currently?
Well, thanks very much for the question, and you're right, it is the biggest, world's biggest killer, and also the biggest cause of morbidity as well as mortality. And part of the reason for that is what you alluded to earlier, that we've changed from a very active lifestyle to very much sedentary lifestyle. The cost of calories is decreased, so we're now consuming highly calorific foods, high in carbohydrates and high in fats. And as a consequence, we have many people globally who are overweight, and they create complexities in terms of cardiovascular disease because they clog the arteries and they create a whole range of cardiovascular health problems, which lead then to strokes, to heart attacks, etc. So there's quite a range of problems. And one of the best way of dealing with cardiovascular disease is to obviously develop a healthier lifestyle. And many people can move that way. Many others can't move that way, and they need a level of support. And if they get to a level where they have high cholesterol levels and they have a degree of risk of a cardiovascular incident in the next 10 to 20 years, then they're put on statins. And statins work. They reduce cholesterol, reduce cardiovascular risk. But for many people, there's a compliance issue that half the people who start statins have to reduce their dose or come off statins after 18 months. So there's a real compliance issue with statins. And quite a large number of people who are on statins don't actually get to a healthy level of cholesterol, reduce their cholesterol, so don't get to a healthy level of cholesterol. And that's why people have started to look for non-pharmaceutical solutions. So you're looking at products such as the stanols and stenols that you find within many food products, such as your margarines like Benecol. And increasingly, as the science has developed, the use of supplements, and we've been quite active in that area in terms of probiotic supplements to reduce cholesterol and reduce cardiovascular risk, because blood pressure and high cholesterol levels are real significant risk factors in predicting a cardiovascular incident like a stroke or a heart attack. So we're seeing a change in the trend globally away from pharmaceuticals to more lower risk, lower side effects, greater tolerance products like supplements. And we've been very fortunate to recognize that trend and create products that meet that need.
Well, thank you so much for giving your insights on that. And, Mr. Ora, if you could just please tell us that, why are these supplements increasingly being used by the consumers to help manage or prevent many of these diseases, including cardiovascular diseases?
I think there's been a big change in the last 4 or 5 years. I think many supplements had a poor clinical and scientific evidence base 4, 5, 6 years or so ago. Then you had and there was sort of marketing, and often false marketing. Then the European Food Standard Agencies and other agencies around the world started to look at this and see there's a lot of mis-selling of supplements. As a consequence, and I think it's a great from our point of view, was that companies who were selling products had to support any health claims with science. So they had to support what they were saying with facts and with clinical studies. So what you've seen over the last 4 or 5 years is that many companies now are developing supplements that have good science, so they understand the science behind how their products work, and clinical studies. So they've tested their products to show that they're safe, they're tolerated, and very important that they're efficacious, that they work in humans. And that's been the difference over the last 3, 4, 5 years. And we've seen that trend developing, particularly in those countries that have healthcare systems which are based around a whole range of insurance schemes, whereby to take a statin creates a problem in terms of the insurance costs of that scheme in subsequent years. So taking a supplement is a very viable and an increasingly more attractive option.
Certainly. And could you also please explain to our listeners the science behind your probiotic, LPLDL, and the results of some of the clinical studies?
Yeah, as I touched on earlier, many of these companies are responding to the increase in regulation and the consumer need, because consumers are more educated, by developing the science on their supplements and showing evidence of safety, tolerance and efficacy in clinical studies. So we went very much through a pharmaceutical route to find our probiotic LPLDL. That's its trade name. It's a species of Lactobacillus plantarum, which we discovered. So we screened over 4,000 strains of probiotics, and we're looking for an enzyme called bile salt hydrolase. A bile salt hydrolase deconjugates bile acids, and bile acids typically are taken up into the body from the gut to create cholesterol. And by deconjugating the bile acids, they can't be taken up from within the gut into the body to create cholesterol. So reduce the capacity for the body to produce its own cholesterol. And 75% of the cholesterol in a patient's serum is actually produced by the body. So by creating a system whereby you produce less, you can lower the serum cholesterol levels. So a lot of science has gone into this. And then we've carried out 3 clinical studies, initially in patients who had mild levels of hypercholesterolemia, so slightly elevated levels of cholesterol, up to about 6.5 milligrams per litre. And we saw big reductions in that particular group. So the reason you try mild is you want to make sure that you don't reduce cholesterol levels to an area where there's too few amounts of cholesterol in the body. So you want to make sure it doesn't have a negative effect. And what we found was that in those patients who had cholesterol levels of 6 to 6.5, we saw a 36.7% reduction in cholesterol and a 13.9% reduction in LDL cholesterol. So that was quite exciting. We would subsequently had another study, which is and that's been published in a peer-reviewed journal, and the study was carried out independently by a university. And subsequently, we had another study which hasn't been published yet, it's just going through peer review, where rather than look at people who had mild levels of cholesterol, high cholesterol, we had people with elevated levels of cholesterol. So these are people in the high risk groups. And again, we found reductions in total cholesterol of 35%, but remarkably, reductions in the LDL cholesterol, remember LDL cholesterol is bad cholesterol, of 28%. That's a massive reduction. So these are levels equivalent to statin with a probiotic. So we're excited by these particular changes. And subsequently, we've also had clinical studies of our products. So these are products containing LPLDL, and we've seen reductions not just in cholesterol, similar to what we found in our own studies, also of blood pressure. So we think we have a great product that is safe and tolerated, with no comments, no concerns over side effects or tolerance in any of our studies. And this product now is sold in approaching 100 countries around the world, and we're finding, most importantly, within customers, we're finding similar levels of cholesterol reduction of 20, 30, sometimes 40% reduction of cholesterol in these customers. So we seem to have a very good product which has some good science behind it, supported by some good clinical studies.
Sure. And during the last podcast, you mentioned that the human microbiome is forecast to become one of the world's fastest growth areas. Now, can you please explain the concept of how probiotics can help consumers to maintain a healthy lifestyle?
Sure. So the microbiome is the microbes and their genes within our body, okay, and on our skin. Most of the human microbiome, most of the studies on the human microbiome are all to do with the gut, okay, because that's where we have the majority of the organism. So if you look at the body, 90% of the cells in the body are microbial cells. So by changing those microbial cells, you can start to impact on health. And there's 2 ways of changing the microbiome. One is to add other bacteria, probiotics, which is what we're doing with the LPLDL. The other is to add food ingredients for the bacteria that are already in the gut, and these are called prebiotics. So what we're finding is, particularly with our probiotic, we're getting some excellent data as we described earlier, and as we then go down this particular route in terms of look at the microbiome within the gut, we'll find that our prebiotic, which allow us to change the microbes or the relative proportions of microbes in the gut, are really starting to have an impact in a whole range of areas such as stress, anxiety, obesity, diabetes. So we see the ability to change the microbiome in a way which selectively enhances the presence of good bacteria, if I call them that, rather than bad bacteria, if I put it simplistically, is the future of healthcare. One of the ways of doing that, as I described earlier, is probiotics. The other way is prebiotics. And I think as you go forward, you'll increasingly find a combination of both these effects, both by combining probiotics and prebiotics, to have an accentuated effect and to really impact upon human disease.
And if we talk about the organization, OptiBiotix has grown rapidly, doubling its sales last year despite the pandemic. So what are the growth prospects and plans for 2021?
Well, we're in a growth area and we've got some great products. So what we saw last year was remarkable, over, as you say, doubling sales, but we doubled sales and we also reduced our cost by about 27%, and we increased our margin. So commercially, we're growing rapidly, and as we grow the business, we're becoming more profitable in those areas. So we see a continuation in the first half of the year. So our year is January to half year is January to June, then July to December. We see a continuation of sales. I would always caution though that when you look at sales over a short period of time, 6 months, 3 months, 1 month, they are highly variable because we're in a very uncertain world. The world has been impacted by COVID. COVID affects supply chains. COVID affects how people are access to healthcare facilities, to pharmacies, to hospitals, etc. So we're similar in terms of growth. So we continue that growth curve, but I'd always caution, to be fair to investors, that you can't always guarantee that what you achieve in the first 3 or 6 months of the year you can achieve in the next 6 months, because who knows what the next 6 months is going to bring us in terms of COVID.
Absolutely. With COVID, everything is so unpredictable. We don't know what's going to happen next. But on this note, before we end the show, any closing remarks for our listeners?
Just to say, if you're an investor or if you're interested in health, I think it's worthwhile looking at the microbiome space. It's seen by many as the future of healthcare, and certainly now you're seeing the science and the clinical studies catching up with some of the rhetoric in this particular area. So whenever you get a new area like the microbiome, like monoclonal antibodies, like PCR, there's people think it can solve all the world's problems. That's not the case. Most of these new technologies find an area where they make the greatest impact. And I think with the microbiome, in terms of healthcare, I think immunity, gut health, cardiovascular health are really big areas where there's a real need. And I can see some major opportunities and some major impacts of both pre and probiotics in these areas. And as I discussed earlier, our probiotic LPLDL is a prime example. To get reductions in cholesterol of 36-37% is remarkable for a probiotic, and to have that validated in not just 1 but 3 studies is really pleasing. So I hope people find the microbiome interesting. I hope they find OptiBiotix interesting, and I hope they'll, if they have any health issues, they'll look at our products and other companies' products to see if they can help them take a natural non-pharmaceutical route to improve their health.
Absolutely. So if you're looking out for a non-pharmaceutical route, OptiBiotix is your place to go. Please do check out their products. And with this, we have come to the end of the show. Thank you, Mr. Ora, for taking out time for this insightful conversation and shedding light on how well-researched food products can effectively fight lifestyle-related diseases and issues. And the microbiome market is growing by leaps and bounds, and the role of OptiBiotix has a large role to play in this area. Thank you for sharing your insights with our listeners today. We are so happy to have you back.
Thanks, Samta.
And if you want to listen to this podcast again, please log on to our website, that is kalkinemedia.com, or you could also go to our YouTube channel. And do not forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get notifications on latest videos and podcasts that we update. Till then, as we always say, stay apprised and invest wise with Kalkine.